Hey there, true believers. The MCU has become a juggernaut of cinema and changed the way that we see movies. Marvel may not have been the first to create a shared universe, but they were the first to make it a multi-billion-dollar industry. More recently, they have finished their fourth phase and entered into their fifth, and things have begun to feel a little lost. But at first,
there was an idea.
Iron Man is far from a perfect movie. It lacks in action and falls victim to having the hero fight themselves at the end. Not only that, it did also start a long tradition of skybeams that has become a staple of the genre. Flaws aside, it acts as a wonderful character piece, with the story revolving around a flawed protagonist as he seemingly embarks on the classic hero's journey. But I don't think of it as a hero's journey. Well, not in the traditional sense. The movie was famously shot with nothing more than a bare bones of a script. So looking back, it's a bit of a marvel that the level of depth Favreau achieved through his visual storytelling. The opening scene tells us everything we need to know about Tony Stark. He's playful, quick-witted, and carefree. The scene is punctuated by the Stark bomb, his legacy of bad decisions literally blowing up in his face. This tells us something else about his character. He's the bad guy.
You are a bad guy, but this does not mean you're a bad guy.
And in case anyone believes otherwise, let's take a little look at his track record. He's part of the 1% and a multi-millionaire, but he made his money through war profiteering, which in turn was probably responsible for the deaths of thousands, and just on a fundamental level, he lives a shallow life of sex, booze and partying. Okay, so he's not evil, sure, but he's not good. The missile is a catalyst that has far-reaching effects. If you think about it, without the missile, there would have been no shrapnel in Stark's heart. He'd never meet Yinsen and build the arc reactor. He wouldn't have built the suit to escape that led to the Iron Man suit, and certainly wouldn't have a newfound understanding of what his weapons have done. He wouldn't have become Iron Man or been part of the Avengers, and so, when it came to the 14,605 possible futures, he wouldn't have been there to snap his fingers and Thanos would have won. Following this, the movie takes us back 36 hours where we are welcomed by an exposition dump of Tony's life, how smart and selfish he is.
The son of legendary weapons developer Howard Stark quickly stole the spotlight with his brilliant and unique mind.
This is cleverly laid out through an award ceremony where his best friend is offering him an award and he's not even there to accept it. We are introduced to the other villain of the movie, which is Obadiah Stane, who accepts the award on Tony's behalf. While playing the montage video of Tony's life up until this point, we see Stane as depicted standing over a globe, looking down on it from up on high. When Howard Stark passed, the company transferred to him, and he continues to grow the business until Tony comes back to take it from him. The images move Stane into the background, despite what he's done. Stane, now living in his shadow, has to claim the award on his behalf. This visual gives us Stane's motivations without needing to explicitly state it. He looks at the accolade with reverence. He talks about what he believes Tony would say, but this is a thinly veiled moment of introspection. Even though Stane is not yet revealed as the antagonist, it's clear that he's jealous of Tony and what he has. And speaking of Tony, he is flippant about the trophy, and his actions show how he thinks of the world around him. Which in turn brings us to his view on women. As I mentioned, Tony Stark is one of the elite 1%. Women throw themselves at him, and he sees little value in these trifles beyond getting his rocks off, and so places little value in them. We can see he lives fast, and just in case you had any lasting impressions that he might see women as more than objects.
I got caught doing a piece for Vanity Fair.
Much like Tony, we are distracted by the scene. Rhodey is ranting and Tony's not listening. But Rhodey's right. There is more to him. Finally, we see Tony's speech, and really think about what he's saying.
Is it better to be feared or respected? They say the best weapon is one you never have to fire. I respectfully disagree. Find an excuse to let one of these off the chain.
Find an excuse? Are these the words of a good man and a righteous man? No, these are the words of a villain. As an aside, I love the detail that the repulsor technology that Tony later uses for the flight element of the suit was actually designed for these missiles. Finally all caught up, here we see Tony's capture, and I see this really as an incarceration of his crimes, with the shrapnel edging closer to his heart, that being his death sentence. In Christian religion, a baptism is performed by immersing them in water, symbolizing purification as an identification with Christ's death and rebirth. I believe in this moment we have witnessed Tony's rebirth with the flashing image of a new heart forming and a voice calling to him of what he really wants. The tour of his weapons in the hands of terrorists sparked the start of a change. The Mark I is built to be the vehicle of their escape. His first machine built from his resurrection is made to protect. Destroying the Stark weapons upon his exit takes them out of his enemy's hands, but also acts as Tony's rejection of who he was. Tony's press conference is a proclamation, and not just of intention, but the importance of his change. We ask people to sit down when we have dramatic news. Tony's first flight, however, proves that a change of heart does not change his personality. He is still the same reckless adrenaline junkie, just with a conscience. At this point, it's worth noting that Tony's life has been complicated by his want to be with Pepper, and his need to do the right thing. So before I continue, let's address that. When we meet Pepper, the back and forth coupled with what we've already learned about Tony tells us a little bit about their dynamic.
I do anything and everything that Mr. Stark requires, including occasionally taking out the trash.
On top of this, she is very adept at the verbal sparring matches required when dealing with a
genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Their almost flirtatious relationship is not built on sex but mutual respect. After his rebirth, Tony is seeing Pepper for the first time. However, I don't believe this is true of her. No one looks at their boss this way unless there is a deeper seated emotion.
A few tears for your long-lost boss?
Tears of joy.
When changing the arc reactor, Tony is in a very vulnerable position, and he only trusts Pepper with such a delicate surgery. In this moment, the two share what is probably the most sincere conversation they have ever had.
You are the most capable, qualified, trustworthy person I've ever met.
Ever ask me to do anything like that ever again.
I don't have anyone but you.
After, Pepper is left holding the thing that saved his life. Tony tells her to discard it, but she recognises the significance of what she holds, his renewed heart. This leads us to the benefit, and more of Tony's fantastic doublespeak.
You got it. You're absolutely right. Well, I'm going to go to my assistant, and we'll make a date.
The dance with Pepper symbolises what they both want. The difference between the two is that Tony's used to getting what he wants. He lives spontaneously, and rarely thinks about the consequences. A character trait that gets him in trouble more than once. Pepper, on the other hand, is starkly aware of the follies of dancing with her boss.
No, it was not just a dance. You don't understand because you're you. And everybody knows exactly who you are and how you are with girls.
But Tony's desires finally take a back seat when his past comes back to haunt him, this time in a black dress.
You have a lot of nerve showing up here tonight. Can I at least get a reaction from you?
Panic.
He then finds out they have sold weapons to Terrace and that Stain was the architect of freezing him out of his own company. The following scene is fantastic as it shows, rather than tells us, what Tony is feeling. Just in case you can't see it on his face, the light on his glove intensifies as he sees what's happening. The suit is his way of paying back to society. He can't go back to his life, ignoring what has happened anymore, and in a way it acts as a self-made prison. His liberation of the villagers, heroic though it is, still represents a problem in his overall ideology.
I prefer the weapon you only have to fire once. That's how Dad did it. That's how America does it. And it's worked out pretty well so far.
He goes into a hostile territory, takes out his enemies and destroys his weapons and then leaves.
That's how America does it.
This help is limited. He only took out a faction of the Ten Rings, and their leader is still in a position to continue his tyranny. Stain, on the other hand, is completely self-serving and has no care for these people. However, his methods are decisive, cutting the head off the snake. I feel this leaves me in a slight quandary. What is more important, the intention or the act? Tony's intentions are good, but the act doesn't deliver what's required, whereas Stain's does. This leads us into the third act. I find Tony's struggle to retrieve his original arc reactor isn't only to save his life, he's scrambling towards his heart, to the new sense of ethics he's found. There probably isn't much to the final showdown to look into, other than the representation of Stain's outdated worldview and Tony's new worldview.
Put him down! Collateral damage, Tony!
Stain's dialogue is interesting. There is some foreshadowing here for Age of Ultron, where Tony has yet to learn his lesson.
Ironic, Tony! Trying to rid the world of weapons! You gave it its best one ever!
As a couple of final thoughts, revisiting the movie reminded me of Steve Rogers' line in Avengers.
You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play, to lay down on a wire and let the other guy crawl over you.
Avengers Endgame gets a lot of credit for bringing this full circle, but in truth, Tony changed in this very first movie and proved that he is the guy to lay down on the wire. Tony's final speech portrays an internal conflict of who he was and who he is becoming.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly, with this laundry list of character defects, all the mistakes I made.
I'm left with a feeling of hope and optimism. This isn't a traditional origin story, because in truth, this is a villain's unwitting journey to hero.
The truth is,
I am Iron Man.